Well, thank you. I'm hugely honored to be here on stage in front of people who serve our nation. Palantir, most of our customers are commercial. Most of our revenue doesn't come from intel and defense, and we're pretty global. I think first, part of our history was both being born in Silicon Valley and then leaving Silicon Valley. I think the first thing industry needs to do is affirm that if it's going to work with adversaries, it should always supply at least as good a technology to our services and the people who are defending our nation, which, in the past has not been the case, always. America, one of the things that we forget because it's so obvious to us, to the rest of the world, but often not to us, is in software, America is the #1 nation in the world, bar none. There is really no number two. Number 2 is Israel because there has to be a number 2. But we are #1. And I spent a lot of my life abroad. I speak German, wrote my dissertation in German, and I get people baffled all over the world asking me, how can it be that America is so much better at this than we are? Take Germany, has a lot of smart people, but the delta between what America delivers in software and what everyone else delivers is very wide. And so the key question for me is, how do we make sure that people doing the most important work in the world, like people on the stage, have access to the resources we already have? Some of that is educational. People who are in industry and leadership positions must tell their employees, if you are developing software in this country, you are going to give it to the people on the stage and people in this room, and explain why. That I think is actually the most important thing. We're in our little myopic perch in the valley. So the background in the valley is we've been fighting the valley aggressively pretty much since we started our company in 2004, and we've been battling the valley on 2 issues. One, it is my deep belief and the belief of my company that it's pretty odd to be able to sell your product abroad under very fair terms, essentially because our allies are willing to go along with your pricing because they're being protected by people who are here, and then not ship your software to them, A. B, I'm very in favor of free speech. If people disagree with working with the US military, great, they should be able to voice that, but you as a leader should explain to them, I would hope, what the history is of especially the US military. And not that I have to lecture anyone here, but it's surprising how many people I have to lecture in the Valley about the positive effects and what the world would look like without the efforts of people in the US military. But be that as it may, while they protested my house every day and put barbed wire around our cafeteria, we at Palantir, not just me, but engineers who were 22, fought through that to be able to do something that is more important than just working with the many companies we work with. And so we're already on the unpopular side. And by the way, we say in public what we say in private in this context, which you're also not supposed to do according to Valley rules. So we're a little used to being unpopular. I actually had a very minimal standard, which is lower in the interview. I tell people in the Valley, if you want to do something, that's your right. This is America, by the way, fought for by people on the stage. But be that as it may, you do have a responsibility to articulate what is it you're doing and why are you doing something with an adversary you're not doing with the U.S. government. That is your responsibility to this country and to everybody in the Valley, for which I'm a pariah. AI is equally as transformational. And you need this combination between people that know the material, that's the people on stage, and people who can extend what they're doing, and also people, in my case, I'm really good at managing really complicated, difficult people. And so that's what I do for a living. And then you get this thing where nobody can, and of course there are these enormous, where no one can imagine they're not #1. And that should be our standard. And if that's the standard, and then most of the issues we have in America are not actually because of adversaries, it's because of internal divisions and not being able to agree on certain things. This is why the shift here, agreement, America having consensus on anything is very powerful. And we haven't had that for lots of reasons you can debate, but we do have it now. And then there's the cultural. I mean, why is America so good at software? Well, we actually play fair in teams. We have highly technical people. We're goal-oriented. And we are willing to admit we're wrong and not be stained by failure when we screw up. So I think what we need to do is continue on this trend. I think U.S. government officials should really say loudly to people they want to work with who are developing software that they must supply the best software in the world to them. I think we in industry, by the way, it's often framed as you framed it, but I would say from my vantage point, there are certain technical issues like how do you do AI at the edge? How do you actually create an all-encompassing environment, which is what we're doing with a lot of industry in the Western world, but where the data is segmented. So if you have a global industry, you're not going to be able to hit the data store in France, Korea, America